There's a funny saying that says, my mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. And then there's this great study. I won't get it perfect, but there's this great study of people that went into a room and there was a button that if they pushed the button, it would give them electric shock. Okay. And so what the idea is, they had to sit in the room for 15 minutes in total silence. But they could choose to hit the button with the electric shock. Now, before, they all got shocked and they said they would pay money to never feel that shock. It hurt so bad. 50% of the people in the room pushed the button, and one particular person pushed the button 120 times. This is how hard it is for people to sit with themselves in silence.
Gino Wickman, my friend, always glad to have you. You are on the warpath here with giving great knowledge to the world. New book coming out called Shine. Gino, I got to ask you, you have, what is this, your ninth book? What is it?
This is number 8.
Number 8. Okay. So there's an adage that an author writes the book he or she needed to read at some point in their life. It seems certainly that with your new book, Shine. What are your thoughts on that sentiment? And tell me why you wrote the book.
Yeah, there's also an old saying that says we teach what we needed the most. And so that is my story. I actually don't consider myself an author. I consider myself a teacher. And as I look back at everything I have ever taught, it's what I needed the most. So everything from being an entrepreneur in the making at 18 years old, a lost, mislabeled derelict that led me to write Entrepreneurial Leap, to taking over the family business, doing a big turnaround, a brutal 3-year turnaround, led me to creating EOS and helping other people, run businesses like a Swiss watch, to now this new book, Shine, me having a bit of awakening 4 years ago at 52 years old after getting to the top of the mountain, for lack of a better term, and then the universe hitting me over the head with a sledgehammer, helping me really kind of shed my stuff and find my true self.
There's a lot there. I want to get into what that sort of hammer over the head was, but I've added a new adage, if you will, that sort of rhymes, that we build the business we need to hire, or we needed to hire, right? Mm-hmm. It's sort of, as we work through our own problem solving, is typically something that we wish we had, and we finally get there. I don't want to skip over EOS, because for those who aren't aware of it, Gino created a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And in full transparency, I knew Gino, I had read his book Traction. It was awesome. But I didn't feel like, the timing was right. I don't know. I wasn't sure about implementing EOS. I now tell my team we use EOS because NOS, Nick's operating system, sucks. But EOS is absolutely life-changing for anybody who's looking for a way to structure your business so that you can have sanity, probably to get to the points where you can start looking at your sort of inner self, Gino, like you do in Shine. I told my team, I'll try to get into too many isms without explaining here to the audience, for the unwashed masses here who haven't participated in EOS. There's quarterly, offsites, like quarterly planning sessions. And I told my team, I said, as I look back on this last year, and we've implemented EOS, I think we're going on 2.5 years. I said, it really dawns on me that I've been in this business, I think 17 years. I'm not that great at math, but somewhere around there. And, I feel like I've been running on the business on cortisol for like the last 16. And by getting EOS in place, it's actually allowing me to consider what longer term vision might look like, to consider what, strategic planning might look like, as opposed to just being on the treadmill. So I just want to say, first of all, thanks for creating that system and digging in on that. Thanks for sharing with the world. And if anyone here feels like they don't know what to do next in their business, they feel like they're in turmoil, don't wait. Get the book Traction. You absolutely can implement it yourself for free. However, I would also if I'm giving a little bit of a shove, I don't believe there's many people on earth who can implement it as well on your own as you could with an outside implementer that EOS actually can link you up with, because the level of vulnerability and honesty you not only have to have with yourself, but with your work team, I just think it's a very difficult thing to learn to do if you've never done it before without an outside,
Yeah,
an outside
yeah, and
helper.
I would add this to, I think, help create some context for whatever conversation we're about to have, because
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to dust over it either. And so feel free, to dig where you want to dig, because the best way to describe the context is I look at it as I've created 5 pieces of content in the world, and you can see it as kind of the journey of the entrepreneur. And so the first piece of content is Entrepreneurial Leap, as I mentioned, for that person who thinks they want to be an entrepreneur, and it helps them determine if they are, and then shows them how to build a business and start and build a business. The second piece of content is Rocket Fuel, and that's for when that entrepreneur needs to find their counterpart. I call it the visionary integrator relationship, to take the business to the next level. EOS, as you described, is the content to help that entrepreneur run their business like a Swiss watch with their leadership team. Fourth piece of content is EOS Life, for when that entrepreneur wants to then live their ideal life. We call it the EOS Life. And then the fifth piece of content is what I call 10 disciplines. And so the first 4 pieces of content are all that outer world success, climbing the mountain that you're alluding to. The fifth piece of content, 10 disciplines, is to really maximize that outer world, but also start to go into the inner world. And that's what Shine is all about. So feel free to have at any of the content. I still spend half my working time, in EOS. I still have clients. I still do talks. I sold the business. I still own 12.5%. I still own all the books. I'm still the EOS guy. So it's still very much a part of my life. But now I'm going into this inner world with entrepreneurs. That's a really wild, fun, scary, cool place.
Dig it. All right. So, obviously there's really just a great lesson in there that publishing valuable wisdom does lead to building a business as well. Most people would guess, the business of book publishing, there's not many people on earth who make a lot of money selling books, particularly compared to the business one can build on the back of the wisdom in the books. And so obviously I know you've done well with both, but I think it's very interesting that, obviously books and publishing are still a massive part of your business. I mean, I would imagine probably one of your biggest lead generators. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And then quickly on the numbers, we have about 250,000 companies and entrepreneurs, using those tools and information that I just shared with you. And we just cracked 2.5 million copies sold of the books. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to your point that you can build a business on wisdom. It is possible. And it all just started with me having this passion, knowing that I could help entrepreneurs. But like we started, I wanted to teach what I needed the most.
So Entrepreneurial Leap, I actually recommend it and talk about it a lot. And I know when we first started talking about it, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, you thought that book was going to be for kids. Turns out that, and teenagers, turns out that book is really for anyone at any stage of life who's questioning, am I an entrepreneur or not, right? And I'm in the phase right now where I've got a almost 19-year-old son who's a freshman in college. I've got a 16-year-old son in high school. I got a 12-year-old daughter. And it's interesting, obviously, the different phases of raising kids, as you know all too well. I've met one of your kids, but the phases of raising your kids, and you didn't screw her up bad, which I was impressed by. She seemed really normal.
That's a miracle.
Yeah. And so, like, talking to my son going into his freshman year of college, I really relied on a couple things that you and I have talked about that you shared in Entrepreneurial Leap. I would love, because I don't recount it exactly correctly, but when you talk about in the Entrepreneurial Leap, you surveyed entrepreneurs about going to college, and what their response was pretty surprising. And then there's sort of a unpacking there that I used with my son when we're getting him ready to go to college. Tell us a little bit about what you learned in the Entrepreneurial Leap about entrepreneurs in college, how necessary, how unnecessary, the big myth that all billionaires didn't go to college. Break down a few of those things.
Yeah, for sure. And create a little context there as well. The point you make about age. So I was writing that to my 18-year-old self because, like I said, I was a mislabeled derelict. And I thought that was going to be kind of the age range for the book. You're right. It ended up being, we have an academy now for Entrepreneurial Leap. And I think the youngest age in the academy is about 22. And the oldest is like 53, so I would have never guessed. That's for any startup entrepreneur. And the youngest age that's been able to comprehend the book is like 8 years old. So for what that's worth. But what I did in the book is I wrote an entire chapter called College or Not, because I really wanted to address that for the young person, up to 18 years old that's about to make a college decision. And I was biased because I never went to college and I turned out okay. I survived. So I had a little bit of a bias there, like I said. But what happened is I started asking all of my clients that have MBAs, and most of my clients went to college, if not almost all of them. And I would ask them over a 20-year period, I would say, are you using anything from your college degree that is serving you as an entrepreneur? And they would say, no, not one thing. MBAs. I mean, anyway, I could go on a tangent there, but I'm not going
I got
to.
a law degree, and I resemble that. So carry on.
So with that, I was very biased. But then what I started doing about 10 years ago is asking a follow-up question and saying, knowing everything you know now about college, would you go back? And 100% of them said yes. So then I'm scratching my head thinking why. And so then I would ask them why. And they said two things. They said, number one, it was the relationships that I formed that have now served me well later in life. And number two, it was a practice ground for me to sell stuff to people, come up with ideas, sell t-shirts, sell this, sell that. So that was the reason for college, kind of the social benefits, not the education for being an entrepreneur. And then I give statistics. And your point about billionaires, I give a list and I show a list of half the billionaires that have a college degree, half the billionaires that don't have a college degree. So the point in all that is, you don't have to go to college to become successful as an entrepreneur. It's a choice that you need to make. And then I basically give a bunch of ideas, classes, degrees to take to really hone some skills that will help you as an entrepreneur based on the feedback from these entrepreneurs that went to college. So there's some of the data, and that's what I cover in that chapter.
That's great. And so, yeah, what I learned from that sort of practically as my first son was going to college and is at college, we started talking about, what he should study. And, I'm super blessed with amazing parents, immigrant family. I'm an immigrant as well. And so, education highly stressed. It wasn't, are you going to college? It's which college are you going to? And I was extremely entrepreneurial, working, owning businesses in high school, all the things, teaching tennis lessons, being a clown. I mean, I did everything, right? And so it's, where are you going to school? And then I basically, because I know it's a shock to everyone, but I'm super ADHD, didn't enjoy college. But I enjoyed the social parts. My coping mechanism is getting through as quickly as I possibly can. So I actually was prepared and had everything ready to graduate from college in 2.5 years. But it also, it wasn't a forced thing, but it was from the time we were little, my parents told my brother and I, just decide which profession you're going to get. So it wasn't like, are you going to get a profession? And they're like, to be fair, they said, you can do anything you want in life. We just would love for you to get a profession. And it was based on their trauma, right? And their life that they had lived. Yeah. So my brother is a child forensic psychiatrist, boarded in 5 specialties. That wasn't going to be me. So I eked my way into law school, but I couldn't start law school yet. So I actually was ready to finish college in 2.5 years. I dropped tennis as a class. And by the way, I was top 100 in the state of Florida in youth tennis. So it was an easy class so that I didn't have the credits to graduate. And I stayed an extra semester to keep my scholarship dollars. So I actually got paid to do 12 hours of independent study in blues guitar with a friend who was a professor. So it worked out. And then I went on to law school. But what I taught my son, who going to college, as we were discussing what I wanted for him, I said, I can't lie that I think maybe getting a profession is not a bad idea, especially if if you're not using it to lock you into a career. Because I didn't use it, like, I don't practice law. I'm licensed, but I do not practice law. Like, you don't want me to practice law, okay? But it's allowed me in so many instances to get an amount of credibility that I don't deserve, let's say, because I went through it. I have the degree. I remember one time I'm unemployable, but I had a job early on for 2 or 3 years with my business partner before he fired me and we started a business together because I'm unemployable. I'm like just out of law school. I'm 24 years old. I think I'm waiting for my bar results, and we're in this board meeting, and the CEO of the company says to this like 70-year-old man who's like 100 years of experience in the business, "Oh, make sure you get that contract to Nick so he can review it and sign off on the deal." I'm like, "What are you doing?" Like, I have no confidence in this field at all. Like, I can make sure it doesn't say like our firstborn child is sold, but other than that, like, I have no idea the context. But so what I told my son was like, look, if you're going to work for somebody else, because not everyone's an entrepreneur, and I love that about Entrepreneurial Leap. Like it's not celebrating one or the other. It's actually saving you from the pain of both,
You got it.
which is a beautiful thing. So I told my son, look, I wish it would have been presented to me this way. And again, my parents just weren't, from this culture. But for me, I said, how about I want you to get an education. I think it's important. It's 4 years to grow up. It's 4 years to screw up. It's 4 years to learn how from 18 to 22, all of a sudden, the difference is in 4 years, you're going to be expected to provide for yourself, like completely. So let's take that 4 years and let's learn from it, right? And so, but I want you to study something you're absolutely fascinated by. Because I don't know many people at all who, to your point, who actually practice what they studied in college, their degree. I mean, most people's degrees are essentially throwaways. They thankfully find a career they're hopefully fulfilled with. And so I said, so like you trying to guess what you're going to do in 4 or far less 10 years from now, pretty much useless. So just study something you're fascinated. Like I think I could have really enjoyed college had I found a undergrad degree to study was something that like fascinated me daily. Like that would make it a lot more fun. I said, and then if you're going to work for somebody else, if you want to be the boss, you're probably going to have to get another degree. I'm just going to put it that way. And so that's up to you. And so I really thank you because it opened up a conversation I wouldn't have known to have. It's still the jury's out whether I screwed him up or not. We'll find out. It'll happen. But I think it's a really healthy perspective for a lot of people to stop. Again, as the whole concept of this podcast, questionable, like what's a better question to ask? And so instead of like, what do you want to study or what do you want to be or what do you want to do? It might be like, what do you want to get out of these 4 years? Like, what do you want to get out of it? Do you want to have, do you want to have a great social balance and learn some things you're interested about? Well, then maybe you probably shouldn't study engineering. I don't know, because I understand that's probably a pretty hard degree for most people. So I think just, finding the way to ask those better questions, and obviously knowledge and wisdom leads to that. So I think hopefully that's a helpful dialogue for anyone in life, because, we all have these moments of clarity with our kids and with our spouses and all these things. And that was super helpful to me. So I greatly appreciate that. Most of your work has been done on up to this book, Shine, which is coming out soon. Everyone check it out. Gino writes great books. I'm going to give him credit for that because crappy books suck. So, check out Gino's books. They're all profound. I actually will say this. I was meant to mention to you before, Gino. I think if there's one person on earth who could recreate at this point in time the cultural phenomenon of The Secret, I think you could do it, Gino. So I'm just going to put that out there for you. I think you could create something that had mass pop culture appeal, but was appealing to the entrepreneur and the self-help and the personal development perspective of someone. So throw it out there. So check out Gino's books, check out Shine for sure. Gino, most of your work before this was all about the outer self, achieving, performing. You obviously have done a lot of introspection right now, but let's talk about where you were at when you had these realizations, maybe what the hammer over the head was that you said, and what did you learn about where your performance drive and maybe unhealthy, how it got you on a healthy level, maybe before you had to start looking at the inside.
Yeah.
Give me a bit of a history of where you think that all came from.
Yeah, for sure. So, I describe it as climbing the mountain, so at 52 is when I had a little bit of an awakening is the only term I could use for it, but we could call it a million different things. We don't need to label it necessarily. But what happened is I had sold EOS worldwide, and the dust had settled. Life was really good. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but I was sitting there in my living room and thinking, my life is pretty damn good. I mean, damn near perfect. I've got friends that love me, family that loves me. I love them, all the stuff. And the second I had that thought, like I said, the universe hit me over there with the sledgehammer or the 2x4, but something just came welling up inside of me, and all of the pain and trauma that I had buried. Now that I look back, I realize at age 15, when I created my persona, all came rushing up. And so there's an amazing guy, Dr. Doug Brackman, who wrote a book called Driven. And he says that our trauma comes up when we are safe. And it was like, whoa, that just made so much sense. And when he works with entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, driven people, and he talks about for the Navy SEAL, their trauma doesn't come up when they're on the battlefield. Their trauma comes up when they're sitting on the couch at home safe. That's when it all comes up. And that's what happened for me. And I realized that since age 15, for almost over 35 years, I was in battle. I mean, I was fighting a war. I just wanted to be successful, have a great family, great friends, a great business. And so as I go back to age 15, that's when I realized I created my persona, this tough guy image, hardworking, fighting, drinking. Fortunately, drinking was never a problem for me, but it was age 15 when alcohol touched my lips and it numbed me. And I'm like, whoa, I just saw the whole world a different way. And I look back on my trauma, and I had a lot of trauma as a young person growing up. And I just learned how to bury it and protect myself from ever feeling that pain again. And then I just put my head down, and I literally just went to work for over 35 years. I've always danced around the trauma and the pain. And so I would get little pings here and there. I would do some work here and there. You know, I did therapy in my 20s. I've done various things, but man, it just came up in a really big way at 52, which was 4 years ago. And so it has been an incredible 4 years of going inside, you know, learning where all that pain and trauma came from and releasing it all and just letting my true self truly shine. So there's the answer to your question, trying to put it in as small of a nutshell as I can, but that's a hard one to answer in a nutshell.
Yeah, so we'll dig into there. So I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that most of us are pretty resilient. I mean, through a lot of things. And most of us, I would imagine, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I feel like most of us are reluctant to admit that we've had trauma.
Oh.
I think because we, thankfully, most of us don't want to have a victim mentality. There is a such thing as a survivor mentality, which is, I think, is much healthier. But talk about how one might, and then I also would say this, I feel like trauma is also such a spectrum for people, because it's, trauma for one person could be that, their family didn't have enough food to eat, or that they were beaten by a family member, or sexually abused. Like, that is trauma that I have not had. However, trauma really comes to, it seems to me, and I'm no doctor, I have to ask my brother's a psychiatrist, but trauma, he's why I'm screwed up, for the record. No, I was kidding. Trauma, it's relative, right? So whatever really takes you, I would imagine, to a really uncomfortable place, whether it's, bombs coming at you as a Navy SEAL, or just feeling unsafe in a classroom, or walking home from school, or what, there are these moments, I bet every one of us, if we dug in deep enough, could remember that sort of we just survived through, didn't really pay any attention to because nothing bad happened, but it's a sort of a bookmark and perhaps a screen door. If we're born with all the light in the world, just ready to rock, it's one of these screen doors that just starts shutting that down a little bit, that we don't, and then we get to a certain stage, we don't realize the light has been dimmed because we've just started protecting and walling off. Mm-hmm. How do we identify trauma? How do we admit we've had trauma? Yeah. And then we can talk about what we maybe do with it.
Yeah, no, it's so great. You're spot on, because I never want, so as we look at that age 15 to 52, if we look at that time span, I never wanted to talk about that stuff. And it felt wimpy to me, so I felt like a wimp to show any kind of weakness. And so to share my pain and trauma with the world, I couldn't even imagine. Well, now I've put it all in a book. And what's crazy is I'm so comfortable sharing it now. And I look back at myself from 15 to 52, and when anyone would share that trauma, I would kind of judge, and feel like, what are they doing? I mean, they're sharing their trauma. What's the point? Well, it is incredibly freeing. So I've learned to let it out. Now, what I would recommend to somebody, which is what I did, is when I finally looked back and realized the trauma. So, I have a theory that we're born perfect. I mean, we are born these wonderful beings. We're this true self, this soul, this essence, whatever you want to call it. And then life gets a hold of us and influences us. And again, we have experiences, trauma, pain, things like that. So for me, I was sexually abused twice by an older boy in the neighborhood, 2 different houses. We moved 9 times by the time I was 10. I went broke at 21, 25, 32. I was bullied. I was this like tiny, highly sensitive, creative kid, and I was just bullied all the time. So at 15, I tucked it all inside and just kind of hid from it all. So, I've had those kind of traumas, but everybody's got their own story. And some, like you said, it's massive trauma. Some is minor trauma. Nonetheless, we all have our story. Well, what I learned was when I really started to go there, open up, I started by sharing it with my wife, and I was really embarrassed to fully share it. And when I shared it, she was still sitting there and she didn't leave me. So my biggest fear is if I open up and share this stuff, everybody in my life is going to leave me when they find out the real me, who I really am. And so she didn't leave. So then the next thing I did was share it with my kids, and they didn't leave me. And certainly with this book, I had them read the first 27 pages, which is where I share my story. And they both not only gave me the thumbs up, but embraced it. Then I started sharing it with friends. Now you don't have to do all that out there. But so here I am putting it in a book, sharing it with thousands of people, 10,000s of people, potentially hundreds of thousands of people, and who knows where this goes. But I am so comfortable sharing it because I understand and see the benefit. It's not sharing it to have a trauma party or woundology or to woe is me bullshit. It's to release it, because what's happening is our ego is holding on to it, and it's still trying to protect us from ever feeling that pain again. And to let it go and let your soul and true self fully shine, it is so worth it. Because for us driven people, and that's the focus, is to help driven people, specifically driven entrepreneurs, to release it, it actually increases our drive. The fear is always that we're going to lose our drive, we're going to lose our edge. And so that pain, that wounding, gives us an edge. It's not true. I'm walking proof. My drive is stronger than ever. We're actually more creative. We're more driven. We're more intuitive. It's incredibly powerful. And so I describe it as it is possible to be driven and have peace. I always thought it was a choice. I thought peace was wimpy. When I felt my first sign of peace when my kids were born, I stuffed it back down because I felt like a wimp and like I was going to lose my edge. So it's just the opposite. So I'm on a soapbox to say, release your trauma and pain. Admit it to somebody that you love in your life. Tell your inner story, and you literally release it. Now, there are lots of other ways to shed and release, but that's a good starting point.
So obviously you and I have a lot of experience in the entrepreneurial world, but I would assume it's not just entrepreneurs, that trauma can drive people to have an edge within, chasing, a career, building a business, whatever else. And yeah, I think one thing that we all have to realize is that, drive is good. But it can become a monster. And that's where we have to start separating, like, why am I doing this? Like, it's healthy to want to provide for your family. It's healthy to want to, have nice surroundings and be able to go on vacations where you can relax and all these things. But it is unhealthy to be so driven that you're just actually running from a monster all the time. So I think many of us start a business, chase professional success, awards, all the things, which, by the way, are not unhealthy things in and of themselves. But if the purpose for chasing them is, still trying to prove to your 7-year-old self or whatever else it is that you're good enough, then we probably need to have a reflection about that. My friend, Jack Canfield, most people know Jack from, Chicken Soup for the Soul of Success. You might have heard of it. He sold 500 million books. Jack is the exception, made a lot of money selling books. And so Jack said to me one time, he said, Nick, you fly in planes a lot, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I tend to fly in a lot of planes, Jack. He goes, you strike me, Nick, as sort of like the first kind of 10 rows kind of guy. I'm like, well, when I can, I try. And he said, Nick, how would you feel if you were sitting in an airplane and a little 3-year-old comes on the plane in a pilot's outfit and you're like, man, that kid is cute. He's like, but here's the thing. It's not Halloween. Kid goes into the cockpit, locks door, and says, hello, everyone. I will be your pilot today. He goes, that's literally what most of us are doing every day. We're letting the 3-year-old version of ourselves drive this multi-million-dollar piece of 40 plus, steel, as I like to call it, into the world. And it was a really profound way he described that to me. And I think most people, look, life can be brutal, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, hopefully everyone has great relationships and some fun times, but there's this layering on of trauma and of anxiety and all these things that we see people get so medicated for because we've never taken the time to deal with them. And I think that I don't know what the percentage is, but I would imagine a majority of people even listening to this have probably never stopped to deal with that stuff. And until you deal with the 3-year-old, as Jack calls it, or the adolescent in you that, really your formative years. I mean, when you're 10 years old, every year is 10% of your life. So, I mean, every day is massive. So it's no shock that these first part of your life, the first 15, 18, 25 years, everything just hits a lot harder because you have less experience, you have less ability to communicate, you just have less of all the skills one might need typically to cope. So I think it's really important. Obviously, I know it's very important. That's why you wrote the book, that we separate this darkness, this edge, from fulfillment. I think that's one of the things we constantly chase fulfillment. It's not a bad thing to seek success, but our mutual friend Dan Sullivan talks about it. I think he would call it sort of seeking ideals. These ideals that you have in your mind. When this happens, I will finally be happy. And I don't know about you, Gino, but the 22nd Emmy didn't feel a whole lot different than the first one. I mean, I think the second one was like, okay, I could do it again. That did feel better, but the 22nd one, not a whole lot different. What's the process where we can start to, obviously we've talked about identifying and working through trauma. There's lots of conversations need to happen with friends and family, with professionals, with colleagues, just having a great circle of communication, a great network of people you can talk to about anything. I'm thankful, Gino, I consider you in that group with me. If I got a question, I got to work something out, it's great. You need to have friends. You need to have people. And by the way, I have a friend who got in trouble recently with sort of just made some bad decisions. And I really realized he didn't really have any friends. I mean, I love the person, but everyone that was really close to them worked for them. And that's like typically not a great scenario of having a balanced group of people who can make you feel safe, because I mean, it's just not fair to them. They probably can't be totally honest with you, or it would be difficult. So you got to have people you trust, and it might be professionals. They're thankfully with this internet and Zoom age, you can find a professional almost instantly. I have not done really any professional therapy. I would imagine though, Gino, that you would probably advise if you aren't jiving with the person you're speaking with, there's probably lots of other options. So don't let, not every therapist, not every person you speak with is going to be for you. So don't let that dissuade you. But then let's dig in on once we start identifying this trauma, start working through it. How do we start separating achievement from this edge so that we can find peace and drive, and I would imagine have more freedom to drive harder and faster than ever before?
Yeah, here. So I'll try and put this in a nutshell, but it's a pretty big context, but I think it sets the stage for us to go as deep as you want to go into this, because when you talk about my books and their success, the number one piece of feedback I get about the content that I put out in the world is that it's very simple and practical. So what I'm about to share with you is what's in the book that is very simple and practical, just like every other book. That's what I'm able to do. I just see patterns and trends, and I try and dub things down for people to keep it simple. So what you're describing and what I believe is for someone to shed this stuff, and let's just call it, I lovingly like to always say shed your shit, but you can control the profanity in this, but shed your stuff. So it's about shedding your stuff. Well, the only way you can start to shed and address these things is to create space and time to do so. And so what we driven do is we just hide behind really hard work and we just keep ourselves distracted. So ultimately, what I teach in this book with my co-author, Rob Dubay, is 10 disciplines. And we call them 10 disciplines to maximize your energy, impact, and inner peace. Ultimately, what those 10 disciplines do is they create that foundation for you that creates time and space to start to go inside. And so we can come back to that in just a second, but I'm just trying to create some context right now. What I start with in the book after setting the stage, is we share 3 discoveries that I made. And the 3 discoveries are made are: first, I am driven, helping the driven person understand their DNA. It's a blessing and a curse. The second discovery is to understand that all decisions are made out of either love or fear, and understanding where it's coming from and why. And then the third discovery, as I already touched on, is that it's possible to be driven and have peace. And so once you understand those 3 discoveries as a driven person, as a driven entrepreneur, it's a light bulb moment to then apply those 10 disciplines in your life to start to allow the time and space for stuff to come up. So now, if that made sense, we can certainly go a little deeper into the discoveries, which might be helpful. But the point there is, once you create time and space, now you're allowing stuff to come up. And so it could be as simple as meditation or some form of stillness, whether that's prayer, contemplation, journaling, meditation, whatever works for you. And so one of the disciplines is be still. The idea is just to get you to slow down or stop, to let it come up, because your soul, your true self is knocking. And when you allow space for it to come up, it will come up. And so the idea, again, the point I'm making is time and space. And then your point on therapy, absolutely. When you decide to let this come up and work on whatever is coming up, then you decide the approach that works for you, because some people can do this on their own. Most can't, but some can. Simply through meditation, stuff will come up and you can process blocks in meditation. Certainly therapy, certainly going to an expert. We give so many resources in this book for all the different ways to shed, and we can go deeper into those if you want. But there's kind of
I love
setting
it.
of the stage.
That's great. I love it. We will. We're talking about Gino Wickman's new book, Shine. Check it out. One of the things I think I'd come on that too, Gino, is that our greatest gifts, when we figure those out, our friend Dan Sullivan calls it unique ability. That one thing you were born to do is incredible when you figure it out. However, it can also allow you to get really out of balance, because when you have a shortcut that the rest of the world doesn't have and you use it all the time, it can be very easy if you just think of it like a muscle. If all you do is exercise that muscle, the rest of your life is going to atrophy. And so one of the things I think is important to lean into what that gift is, and certainly utilize it to make the world a better place, to make money, to, get nice things for your family, to serve the world, whatever it is. But it doesn't mean you get to leave everything else and just forget about it. There is other work that must be done. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that often. The other thing I'm impressed by is you talk about time and space. I have a quote here from you. For the last 20 years, I've taken 150 days off per year, including an annual August sabbatical. I think when most people hear 150 days, that's almost half the year. That sounds impossible. I would imagine about 110 of those are weekends, I would assume.
Yeah, in most cases, yeah, most.
So that makes it super okay, that's doable. I mean, I guilty of keeping up with my email, I'd say, on the weekend, but I don't set office hours on the weekend. About once a year, I end up on a shoot for a weekend making a documentary, and I'm typically miserable because I love what I do, but I don't want to miss the time with my family on the weekends. I'm in a place where it's funny, every time I talk about this, people lean in. And to me, it's just become common sense. But real quickly, as I was, growing in my career, my wife and I thankfully have been married 21 years now. And I had kids early. I had my first son at 25, second one at 27. But as my career started taking off, what happens is you get busy, right? We know you get busy. People start demanding that thing you're good at. And I started traveling a lot because most of what I was doing was either speaking or making documentaries. And at some point, it's about 10 years ago, my wife says, hey there, it's me. And she's like, just reminding you that like, I didn't sign up to do this alone. I really, I sort of like you. That's why I married you. And I think the kids sort of need you. So could we just come to like, I know you got to travel some, like I'll be reasonable, but like, can we just agree on what's reasonable? And it's funny. We came to an agreement as we discussed it that for our life, I can't say what's good for anybody else, but that 7 nights a month was a healthy amount of travel. And if at the time the kids were really young, we'd try to have dinner. We still try to have dinner together all the time, but all the sports and it just gets harder and harder. But, if I was gone for dinner, that was half a night. Right. And that was like the formula that I used to give me guardrails. I found you can never win a game if you don't know the rules. And sometimes if you don't know the rules, it's probably because you made up the game. So you probably need to make up some rules. Mm-hmm. And so that really helped me to sort of center myself and go, okay, this could be healthy. And let me try it. And over the last 10 years, it's obviously proven to be healthy. It's still disruptive. If you do the math, I'm gone a night and a half a week on average. So I'm in and out a lot. I try to spend my time with my family, but taking time off and setting boundaries for that, I arguably could do much better. So let's talk about it. But 150 days, what does that look like? How do you do you never look at an email ever on a weekend? Like what does it really look like practically for you? And by the way, that's just again a disclaim. Everyone's got to figure out their own thing. Mm-hmm. However, I do think it's important to start working through it. And the other thing before I shut up and let you finish, just remember everybody, all this stuff is a process. Health is a process. Fitness is a process. Wisdom is a process. Business is a process. When it stops becoming a process, you die. And that means your business too. When it stops becoming a process, it dies. There's nothing that grows when you don't feed it. Okay, carry on, Gino. That is my diatribe, and tell me what 150 days looks like for you.
So what Rob and I write about in this book is one of the disciplines is called take time off. So it's one of the vital 10 disciplines. And what we urge and recommend is you take a minimum of 130 days off per year. And to your exact point, weekends alone, there's 104 days. Then you have holidays. You're already up to, probably 115 just with holidays and weekends if you're taking 2 weeks off a year. So that's not too much of a stretch. Right. It's different for everybody. So you have to figure out your formula. So I'll give two sides of it because the other side of it is me figuring out my magic formula. We call that discipline knowing your 100%. And so my magic formula is I work 40 weeks a year, 55 hours a week. That's what I've done for those past 25 years, if not 30. So I know my secret formula. And so when I take 150 days off a year, I am very disciplined. I do not do any work on those days. I turn the world off, and I know I'm better for it. I'm more creative for it. I get more done as a result of it. What's interesting, though, is let's talk before and after age 52. So what I realized, I was taking that much time off. I was incredibly balanced. And I was around and with my family and friends probably more than most entrepreneurs, but I was completely unconscious. I was not present. And so what has now changed is I am now present with the people in my life. I mean, I was literally a zombie when I would take time off. So I touted this wonderful time off, 150 days a year. I definitely didn't work, but I would keep myself so busy in that time off doing other things that weren't work or just completely decompressing that, that wasn't entirely healthy, but nonetheless, I was incredibly balanced. The point in all of this is you've got to take time off and you can build, whatever empire it is that you want to build out there, taking 130 days off a year. I recommend 150 in terms of in addition to that, take the month of August off every year. I have for the last 30 years, and I'm better for it. I come back more energized. I hit the reset button. But again, it's very different now in the last 4 years compared to those first 25 years of doing it.
All right, so a couple of practical questions. On your time off, do you read? And if you do, is it only pleasure reading, not business reading? Like how do you divide that stuff up?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I do very little business reading during time off, but occasionally I will cheat on that. But I read a lot of, personal development, kind of self-help stuff. That I read during time off, so that feels appropriate to me. But very little business reading during time off.
Got it. And then, so one of the things that plagues me, so we'll just make this therapy. I could shut off email. You can choose to, like, I learned a long time ago when I had a BlackBerry, like I was Pavlov's dog. Cause when someone emails you, you feel useful when you respond, because they're actually asking you a question. Like they need something from you. And so I learned that, like, I had to turn off the notifications, because every 8 seconds my thing would buzz and I'd check it. So like I turned off all email notifications on everything now, because but I still check it way too much. But like, if someone texts you on a weekend about something in business, do you just not look at it? Do you, like, I'm worried, like, if I look at it, I'll forget and I won't remember. And then I got to write it down. And that feels like working. Like, practically, how do you handle those situations?
Yeah, a couple things there. First thing that's important is I do not check email. Okay. So get a great assistant out there. A great assistant, you're going to get a 5x return on that investment, assuming you replace that work time, with building the business, making money, doing the work. So I have a great assistant that checks all of my emails. And the only emails I hear about are the ones that need a response. And it is very, very few. Point is, I have somebody taking care of that. So I never feel compelled to look at my email, because she'll let me know if there's something urgent that she can't respond to.
So do you meet multiple times a week or whatever to discuss how she needs to reply to certain things?
The way I do it is at 4 o'clock at the end of every day, she leaves in my voicemail whatever I need to respond to. And she's gotten to a point where she can respond to 80% of, she's managing all of my business. She's managing my whole world, but some percentage comes through to me where there's, on average, probably 3 or 4 things she'll ask me at 4 o'clock in a voicemail when I can get to it at the end of the day. And then I will respond to her with whatever she needs. I try and disconnect from technology as much as possible. It lessens my creativity and my intuition when I'm sitting at a computer, which I don't sit at a computer, but for what you and I are doing right now. But let's go to texting now, because here's the reality of texting. So I have been very protected my whole life. Well, let's look back now. How many years was it? 10, 15 years ago, texting starts to happen. I can remember it like it was yesterday. One of my dear friends, tech guy, sends me the first text I've ever received. And when it came through, I looked at my phone and I said, oh my God, they learned how to pierce the shield. So I was so protected. Now, obviously, a text can get through to me. So what I do is I very rarely look at my phone. My phone is always on silent. I go to my phone on my time, not other people's time. And when a text comes in when I'm on vacation or when I'm taking time off, I just immediately, not immediately, I reply when I look at it, if it needs to be replied to, by saying, I'll get back to you Monday. And thank God now you can save a text as unread in the last, whatever, it's been 6 months.
Amazing.
That's a lifesaver. But I will quickly say, I'm on vacation. I'll get back to you in a week. I'll get back to you on Monday. If I'm taking time off, I just immediately let them know that. If I need to, because that's the other thing, I have conditioned everyone in my life that this is not a 24/7 quick response person here. So I will get back to you in 24 hours. That's my deal with everybody. And people also know when I'm not responding that I probably am taking the day off. So the people that really know, I just don't need to respond and will in due time, and they understand that.
Interesting. Yes, I have certainly built my reputation on Johnny on the spot. And,
exactly right. And sometimes I will purposely not respond quickly because I can tell that I will condition that person to think they're going to get a quick response to me. I'm a 24-hour response. I am not a 15-minute response. But there are texts that I'll respond quickly because we're trying to take care of something and solve something during that work days.
Yeah, it's important to note it's not an ego thing. It's what works best for you. Some people might be a twice a day text person, or I'm probably a 15-second text person, because my thing is like emails and texts, I want them out of my life, so I'll respond as soon as possible. But as we all know, it typically leads to additional emails and texts because the response, Yeah.
Yeah. And on that, don't get me started, because another one of the disciplines is say no often. So yeah, it is not an ego thing. It is setting boundaries in your life to protect you, to have great output when you're working and to recharge your batteries when you're not, and to have very clear boundaries around that. If you convinced everybody in your life that you're a 30-second response kind of person, you've lost control of your life and everyone else is controlling your life. So we call it say no often. And saying no means, hey, just so you know, I may not get back to your text for 24 hours. So you're just managing expectations and helping people understand your boundaries.
Let's not get so personal in this conversation, Gino. No, and the other thing I think it's worth noting that you have to feel like you're worth protecting, and I think that that's probably a hard boundary for a lot of people to get over, right?
Yeah. And I always, I truly brag about this, but I love telling people no. I freaking love it. I mean, I get a high from telling people no. And again, it's not being sinister, mean, or egotistical. I'm just protecting my boundaries.
Yeah, and you do it well, and you do it politely. I love it. I've been on the other end of those no's, and it's okay. By the way, just as a note, you say you get them in voicemail. I don't know if you ever used the tool Voxer, but it's pretty amazing for that stuff. It's like a phone walkie-talkie that actually transcribes too, and you can just hold the button and respond, and you can listen in 2x, 3x for guys like me who don't have patience. Pretty cool for voice messaging. It might be helpful.
Yeah, and
this
new upgrade now with voice texting just on the iPhone is I'm shifting to that more now, and so couldn't agree with you more. And that's where we're heading. But the point I'm making that's important to come across, because technology is going to keep changing. But at the end of the day, 4:00. My assistant leaves me any emails that I need to respond to that she doesn't know how to respond, what to say, but she's handling, upwards of 90% of them every day because she knows my whole life.
It makes total sense. You talk about, you had multiple exits in business. You've sold multiple businesses. You obviously done well. One of the things you talk about, I think is worth talking about is, you've gone broke 3 times. And at one point you say you'd lost $1.4 million in 2 years due to bad investments, risk taking, and poor planning. One thing is I hear that from pretty much everybody who ever gets a lump sum of money, typically. And what I would just love to learn from you, like, what did you learn? Like, what do bad investments look like? What do good investments look like for those of us who are still waiting for the big licks, as they call it in lawsuits, when you get a big pop of cash? Like, what have you learned about how you might manage that looking back?
Yeah. Well, what I've learned is that most investments are bad investments. So if you start there, you'll make less mistakes. So I was, so what happened is my goal was to always be a millionaire by age 30. I missed it by 1 year. I was a millionaire by age 31, 1.2 million net worth, lost it all by 34 or 33. And I was $200,000 in debt. So that's where I lost 1.4 million. So what had happened is I made some terrible investments in the stock market. I invested in private equity. So I invested in some companies that looked great. And then I also let about 400,000 of that ride. When we sold the family business, I let 400,000 of it ride, thinking I was going to turn that into 4 million. So I then thought I was going to turn that 1.2 million into 15 million by age 35, because I was convinced every one of these investments were going to 10x. So I think the mistake number one is starting with what I said. Most investments are bad investments, and so there's so many great stories. I'm trying to think of the co-founder of Microsoft that I think it was him that said it, where he said he just stopped making investments because they're all.
Paul
I
Allen,
realized whenever I would make my own decisions on investments, I would get so caught up in the emotion of it, I just couldn't see what was really going on. And so I made terrible decisions. What I shifted to after that is I have a financial person that I don't make a single investment decision without that person. And that person turns down at least 19 out of 20 where I like all 20. So it's just getting caught up in the helium and the emotion of the investment. Seeing nothing but dollar signs was what I did back then. So I became very conservative. I had a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a $500,000 house, and I'm flat piss broke at 33. I mean, I felt like such a loser that I just never wanted to feel that again. So I became conservative. So anyway, hopefully in there you hear the lessons.
No, I got it. 08, 09, I guess I was 27, 28, and I was making like, yeah, not much money a year, and I was a couple million in real estate debt. You learn a lot about yourself then, by the way, and about what things you need to change. It's a good report card. So one of the things you talk about too is that and I think this is really important, that continuous stress, that up down roller coaster, the money, all the things, which to some extent we all have those elements in our life. It's how we deal with them and how we learn to deal with them, I think, is the difference. That it took a toll on your health. At age 45, you learned from your doctor that you had damaged one of your heart valves. Like, this is a thing I think most people don't talk about. Like, you can actually do permanent damage to your body by just, I mean, we've all been 18, 20, 30, or you will be at some point. Hopefully everyone listening to this, you think you're invincible. They say it all, but I didn't believe it until last year when I had a health incident. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I do need to be careful with this stuff. What'd you learn from that? And then, looking back, is there a way you think you could have maybe dealt with the stress differently to not have that damage done? Or you think it's one of those things you just got to do it to learn?
No, it's looking back, I know exactly how I could have managed the stress. What I can't tell you is, would I have taken the advice? So that's the unknown. So I want to say a couple of things here that are really important. So my heart doctor believes it happened in my 20s. Okay. So it happened at a very young age. And in my 20s, I went and I ran so hard. I took over a family business at 25 years old, a 25-year-old kid running an organization with like 70 people. And it was insolvent, deeply in debt. And here I am turning this business around. So I went so hard in my 20s. My central nervous system was so amped up between ages 15 and 52. I now remember that feeling. And I thought it was normal to go through life that amped up and that intense. I just thought everybody felt that those tectonic plates shifting inside all the time. Come to find out now, the last 4 years, my central nervous system just does not get amped up that much anymore. I can feel it when it's coming. So knowing what I know now, yes, if I could go tap my 18-year-old self on the shoulder and say, hey, here's a better way to do this, but I just don't know if I would have taken the advice. So the $1 million question is, and my impassioned plea to the world is, worst case scenario, you'll figure this out when you get to the top of the mountain. And again, I've heard it more times than I can count, but people get there and they say, is this all there is? Just like you talked about with the Emmy, it's what I experienced. So worst case, you're going to get to the top of the mountain. Your soul's going to ping you. You're going to have your wake up call. And whether that's going to be somewhere between, 45 and 65. But my message to anyone young out there is you can get ahead of this. So what I jokingly share, and this sometimes gets misconstrued, because I believe I have a healthy ego, but who knows? Maybe since I said that, I don't. But the point I'm making is I jokingly call myself the GOAT, okay? So GOAT stands for greatest of all time. Not in business. There are millions of people that have been much more successful than me in business. I'm the GOAT of faking it. In other words, I was so effed up on the inside that I just learned how to manage and live with that. But look at what it did to my heart valve. So it was obviously killing me on the inside, because the reality is I survived. I stayed married. My wife and I have been together for like 39 years now. My kids, I think they still love me and I love them. I have great friends. I mean, I should be divorced 3 times. My kids should hate me. I should have no friends. So somehow I just masterfully could fake it. It was unbelievable, the contrast of what I built and how I kept relationships in my personal life, which it should have just been a disaster. So, long dissertation there. Hopefully that answers the question, but bring me back to the question if I'm not hitting it on point.
No, you're nailing it. I think one of the things that, it reminds me of a story when you say, the sort of these ideals and is this it? When I did Peter Diamandis, our mutual friends documentary, I interviewed a guy named Richard Garriott, and Richard had invented the video game Ultima. So he really invented massive multiplayer online gaming. And so he made a ton of money, sold a bunch of stuff, and he bought a seat on the Russian Soyuz to go to space. He wanted to go to space. And so he put his deposit down. He invested his money in the market, and the market crashed. So he had to back out of the seat, and the Russians weren't refunded the money, you might guess. And so he goes and he builds another business, and he sells the other business. Like, now I can go to space. So he builds another, I don't know, $100 million business so he can get everything back and afford to go to space. So I said, so, all right, so you go through all this, you go through the training, you get the seat, you go up in space. I'm like, when you get to space, what's the first thing you think? And he goes, the first thing I thought, man, I thought I'd be further away. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, it's just, nothing is ever quite the way your brain epically. The beauty of your brain is it can make an epic fairy tale out of anything. The dilemma with that is if you're expecting that to really happen, it's probably not going to. All right, so talking about your book, Shine, Gino, let's dig in the 3 discoveries to free your true self. Why don't you tell me what your definition of a true self is, and then let's dig into each of those discoveries a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So your true self is called many things. So for the audience, you just pick the word that resonates with you and the word that works for you, because you could call that soul, you could call that your essence, your life force, your heart, whatever you want to call it. But it's this power source at the center of all of us. And that darn thing burns bright. It is who we are. So the idea, 3 discoveries to free your true self, is to free that darn thing. And so I'm going to take you through really high level the 3 discoveries. The first one is that I am driven. And so the idea is for you out there, the reader, the audience, is to understand you're driven, assuming you are 10% of the population. An amazing book by Doug Brackman called Driven helps you do a really deep dive into understanding it, but it's a blessing and a curse. We're the creators of most things on this planet, but we do a lot of damage. We leave a black trail behind us. Again, we damage our health, exactly, our bodies, our minds, our relationships. We do a lot of damage, but it's genetic. You're not hiding from this, so it can be managed. The second discovery is then to understand that all decisions are made out of love or fear. And then what I do is I take the reader, Rob and I take the reader 4 levels deep into understanding the root of why we're making either a love-based or a fear-based decision. And it would take too much time to cover on this podcast, but I want to put it in a nutshell, because back to your point, what is the true self? So this power source inside of you burns very bright. We are pure energy and we burn very bright, but most of us don't burn bright because we're blocked. And if you picture that power source burning bright, well, it's surrounded by a protective layer that is our ego, protecting us from the pain that you and I have been talking about in this conversation. And so for me, in those first 15 years, and so what happened for me is I built this suit of armor to protect me from the world. And so my true self was trapped in there. Well, all decisions are made out of love or fear. We go 4 levels deep into that. It's first understanding that true self ego relationship. And then we go down to understand that your true self is in there. It's just buried under these protective layers. Then we take you down another level to understand your pure energy, and you're either burning bright or you're not. And if you're not, we take you down another level to understand you just have to remove some blocked energy. You got to release the trauma and pain that's preventing you from fully being your true self and shining in this world. And then it takes us to the final level, and it's just awareness. And it's understanding this emotion that I'm feeling, this decision I just made, this thing I'm doing, is it love-based or is it fear-based? And most people are fear-based. They're coming from a fear-based place, from their ego protecting them. The ego's intentions are good. And so it's all about becoming aware of the ego, having a relationship with your ego, and shedding this stuff, and ultimately letting your true self shine and just have a relationship with that ego. And awareness just says, okay, I'm making a love base, I'm making a fear base, and starting to shift. Because if you make a 10% shift from fear-based to love-based, that is like a Richter scale. The change in your life will be huge, to where you ultimately get to a point where all of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, decisions are love-based. And now that's number 2. Then number 3, as I already shared, is it is possible to be driven and have peace. So now the whole story comes together. Discovery number 1, I'm this driven being, this driven ball of energy, very unique, 10% of the world. Number 2, all of my decisions are made out of love or fear, starting to understand that, bring down the layers. Now all of a sudden in discovery number 3, I can embrace this drive, have this drive, be this being I'm on this planet to be, while experiencing a calm, fulfilled central nervous system, having peace and fulfillment and joy and bliss while continuing to drive. And again, the irony is you literally have more drive than what you had before, because now all of your decisions are coming from the inside out, from your true self, as opposed to from the outside in, weighing all of your decisions through factors, outside factors. What are they going to think? I'm going to fail. I fear success. All these things that just are filters that filter us from just truly letting our true self shine and making decisions from true intuition.
Those are big discoveries everyone can learn from. Gino, in the book Shine, you also cover the 10 disciplines for maximizing impact and inner peace. Let's just go through each of them briefly. The first one is 10-year thinking. What is that?
So 10-year thinking is simply changing your thought process from now. So most driven people are thinking today, this week, this month, maybe next quarter, and maybe next year, but it's this now mentality. And so it's just shifting that thinking to thinking in 10-year time frame, just more long-range thinking. There's teachings out there, 25-year thinking. There's teachings out there, 100-year thinking. I'm just trying to get you to start with 10-year thinking. Because if you will do that, let's go back to that central nervous system, time will slow down, a peace will come over you, and you will make better decisions as opposed to these short now type of decisions we're making. And ironically, you will get to where you want to go faster.
Love it. Number two, we've talked a lot about, but take time off. I mean, I think it's important. You've said that in order to operate at your best when you are working, you have to, it's like recharging batteries. You've got to recharge your batteries or you're going to be running on empty all the time, which will never let you do your best work. Anything to add really on top of that?
Just an exclamation point that this is where you start to create space. Taking time off creates space where you can start to go inside and let stuff come up.
That's probably scary, by the way, for a lot of people too. Just to think
very
about
scary.
that.
There's a funny saying that says, "My mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. I try not to go there alone." And then there's this great study. I won't get it perfect, but there's this great study of people that went into a room, and there was a button that if they pushed the button, it would give them electric shock. Okay, and so what the idea is, they had to sit in the room for 15 minutes in total silence, but they could choose to hit the button with the electric shock. Now, before, they all got shocked, and they said they would pay money to never feel that shock. It hurt so bad. 50% of the people in the room pushed the button, and one particular person pushed the button 120 times. This is how hard it is for people to sit with themselves in silence. They'd rather shock themselves and feel pain than to sit with their thoughts. And so the idea is you got to let it come up, like it did for me at 52 as I'm sitting on my couch in the living room, finally feeling safe.
I don't want to hear any more about this. Number three, principle number three, know thyself.
Yeah. And so this is where, you mentioned Dan Sullivan's concept of unique ability. This is knowing your superpower. This is knowing your genetic encoding. But what we do is we take you all the way to the good stuff, the root. So it starts with understanding your strengths and your weaknesses and your personalities and your traits and skill sets and things like that. But then we get into the deeper stuff, and it's going inside and understanding the pains and the traumas and releasing them. So this is really knowing your true self and living from your true self.
Got it, guys. Everyone, too. This is Cliff Notes at best. There's so much, solid gold in the book. Make sure you check out the book Shine. But we'll go through just these last few because I don't like to leave you with open loops here. Number 4, be still. Talked quite a bit about that as well. But you've got to let this stuff bubble up so you can actually deal with it. And clear thinking. Just rushing around all the time won't let you think clearly. What else would you add to that?
This is where the magic happens. And so we just urge you to sit in silence 30 minutes every day. And that could be meditation, contemplation, journaling, prayer, whatever works for you, but sit in silence. This is where the magic happens. This is where you're truly creating space and time.
Well, I will admit here, because there's probably some other people like me, I got to work on, I pray a lot, but I do a lot of talking to God in my prayers. So trying to do some more listening. So duly noted.
Yeah, and magic comes up, man. You get answers to questions. You get solutions to problems. It's more going on than just shedding all your stuff. Magic truly happens when you tapping into that power source. And that's what the silence does.
I had a friend tell me one time that if you journal correctly, it's like getting letters from God.
Exactly right, man. I
Uh, Number 5, know your 100%. What's that?
Yeah, and so that's that work container that we talked about. It's figuring out your magic formula. Everyone is unique, everyone is different. Again, mine is 40 weeks a year, 55 hours a week. That has been my 100% for the last 25 years. It's shifting for me now because what I'm doing over the next couple of years is shifting to 40 hours a week. So 40 weeks a year, 40 hours a week. I'm toning it down a little bit. But for those 25 years, if I had worked one more hour, I'd start to burn out. If I had worked one less hour, I'd start to get bored. So that was my maximum output. It's like the fuel gauge in a car that when you push the accelerator the perfect amount, you get maximum miles per gallon. It's the same type of thing. It's you dialing in your perfect maximum energy output, where you're making a bigger impact on the world, being more creative, making better decisions, and doing the good work and making money that you do.
Number 6 is say no often. We've talked a lot about this, but there's a couple rules I think I like hearing. You've already talked about some of them, but no meetings before 8:30 a.m. or after 5 p.m. No email on Saturdays or Sundays. No more than 4 hours of meetings per day. No back-to-back meetings, and no saying yes to things out of guilt. That's some pretty staunch rules there.
Oh, yeah. And again, we are suggesting these rules. We urge you to embrace them, but you'll ultimately determine your boundaries. These are boundaries that we're talking about. And I always say, once you have the first 5 disciplines in your life in place, what to say no to is so abundantly clear. It will be automatic. It'd be like somebody telling you to eat a worm. You immediately say no when somebody says eat a worm. It will be that clear for you. It's just simply boundaries. And what you just read there are the jumping off point boundaries we give you, in addition to other boundaries that you'll set for yourself.
Yeah, it's sort of what gives you true energy, not just dopamine, right? You gotta dig in on that. So that's where the rules come into play. I love this one. Number 7, don't do $25 an hour work.
You're here, man. So again, we're not knocking $25 an hour work. So the idea here is just, if you want to earn 6 figures or more, and some of you want to earn 7 figures and 8 figures and 9 figures, you're not going to do it doing $25 an hour work. So this is just simple math. So for anybody that wants to earn 6 figures or more out there, you are crazy to be doing $25 an hour work. And then we talk about energy. Holy cow, you're burning your energy doing administrative tasks. So we need lots of people making $25 an hour, and they love doing it. They make a great living doing it. Those are the people you want to hire to do that stuff to free up your energy. And that includes at home. Unless you love cutting your lawn, shoveling your snow, doing handiwork around the house, pay somebody to do it. It's crazy if you're truly managing your energy, again, and creating space and time for yourself.
Dig that. Prepare every night. Tell me about that.
Yeah. And so these next 2 are really simple. And so people overlook them because they seem so simple. But this is every night before your head hits the pillow, lay out tomorrow in chronological order. So you're just sitting down for 15, 20 minutes, end of the day. That might be at 5 o'clock for you, might be before your head hits the pillow, somewhere in there. You're sitting down and chronologically listing it. So I work from a legal pad every day, low tech guy. So you can do this on a tablet, you can do it in your calendar, wherever you want to do it, but you're just literally laying out tomorrow. What will happen is you will sleep better, a lot less tossing and turning, which again increases your energy. You will wake up with ideas to problems and solutions to things that you're working on the next day, and you will be more creative, more intuitive, because your subconscious is working during the night on what you just prepared for. You will wake up and you will hit the ground running, as opposed to waking up and letting the day come at you because you've just completely lost control of your day. You will be much more productive by preparing every night.
One thing, and I think a great question that I think you bring up, but most people probably don't ask, is also like, what do I want to get out of each of these interactions I'm having tomorrow? Like, what would be a win, so that it's not just, I don't even know. So asking yourself that question, as this is about questions.
Yeah, here.
Is a great place to start.
And one of our clients, in addition to that, they then just mentally walk through their day. We're not recommending that, but it's a very powerful concept if you think about it, where you're literally going through the entire day, just 10 extra minutes and playing it out. How does that not create additional results?
Love it. Number 9, put everything in one place.
Yes, again, comes off as very simple, but very, very powerful. So I use my trusty legal pad. You can do this anywhere. You can do it on a tablet, in a journal, in your calendar, in your notes, wherever you want to do this. But the idea is as you go throughout the day, you're a hard charging, driven person. You are having ideas, you're making commitments, you're making promises, you have thoughts. The idea is to capture every single one of these commitments, thoughts, ideas, action items, promises in one place. So at the end of the day, when you're preparing for the next day, you can then transfer those to the appropriate compartment. Some things you'll move to the next day, some things you'll take care of right there. But the idea is if you go through your day trying to remember all that stuff, it is burning your energy. You're letting people down. You're breaking promises. You're just not as productive. And so the idea is just to get more done and fulfill all of your promises. And then there's a bonus when we talk about the inner work. When you're up and running on your one place all day, every day, when things come up, and they will come up, you feel it in your body, it's an opportunity to jot down at 11:45 when talking to Joe, when we were talking about this, something came up for me so that you can think about it and process it during your stillness the next morning or that night or whenever you do your stillness practice, because you will not remember that an hour later, let alone the next day.
And is your one place your legal pad?
Yeah,
Is
for
that
me,
your
it's
one
the
place?
legal pad, but you could do this anywhere. If you work from a tablet, you're just jotting it down on your tablet, but you want it to be somewhere near you that you can immediately grab the thought so you don't lose it. So I'll be sitting in a meeting, I'll have a thought or somebody will say something. I'm just quickly jotting it down on my legal pad so I don't lose it. And then I compartmentalize it all at the end of the day. I honor all of my commitments and I remember all of those promises.
Well, it seems like a wise thing to use something like a legal pad or notebook because, like, keeping track of it in your email probably not going to be the best thing because you're going to get distracted in there. Even tablets, you can turn off a lot of the notifications. But I use my tablet a ton for note taking and other things. But there is some protection in the physical paper there, which I love.
Here, here.
Final one again from the book Shine. Everyone check out Gino's new book Shine. Be humble. I love this one. So tell me about, you have sort of a scale, even an arrogant to humble scale.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I always describe it as, the definition of arrogant and humble are identical. It's how you view yourself, in the eyes of others, how you compare yourself to others. And so we're all somewhere on that scale. So the idea is to view yourself as an equal to everyone on the planet. And I jokingly like to say, as I talked about earlier, we talked about shedding your shit. Well, you can't shed your shit if you think you're the shit. So the whole idea, we're talking about managing energy and humble people, just simply the tectonic plates aren't shifting as much, the central nervous system. So there's a power in being humble, not arrogant. And you will tend to attract more humble people in your life. Arrogant people tend to attract arrogant people. Humble people tend to attract humble people. Like attracts like. But the idea here, as C.S. Lewis said, so it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And so the power is to just see yourself as an equal to everyone on the planet. And most arrogant people just simply don't.
That's great. I do a lot. I have a rule that anytime someone asks me for help, I'll find a time to do it. It's got to be on my time. So, like, to speak with them about my unique ability as having, meaningful conversations that lead to produced outcomes. So, I mean, if that's for help digging a ditch, I'm probably going to help them with a $25 an hour, other person, not myself. However, I'll spend time with someone who thoughtfully wants to work through something and have a conversation. I enjoy it. I'll do it at lunch. I'll do it in classrooms. I speak at colleges. I know you do all the same things. And it's so interesting. Most people who reach out probably do the same thing all the time. They say, "Oh, I'm so busy. I know you're so busy. I don't want to take any more of your time." And I always remind them, hey, my time is no more valuable than yours. In fact, it might be less valuable. You might have less time on earth than I do. And it's a really interesting perspective shift. Like, wait a second. But it's just, we all have, the amount of time we have in a day. It's how we choose to spend it. And that's our own choice, which is great for most of us, especially operating out, at the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy. It's typically a choice. And so I think it's a really great thing to just keep all that in perspective of, we're here to be great to the world, to one another. We do have to protect ourselves. We have to say no a lot, but it doesn't mean my time is any more valuable than yours. It's just, I just choose to spend it
Of
differently.
course,
Right?
and I go back to, it's interesting that you went there because, you brought that up when we were talking about saying no. And I can see in you where you translate saying no as arrogance. And I just don't. So I just want to say a couple of things that you're prompting there because when you say no, again, for me, like I said, I love it. But what I always do when I say no is I offer them a solution. So for instance, somebody reaches out for me to do their podcast. I can't do every podcast. So I say, unfortunately, no, but here are 3 great guests. I always give them something that might help solve their problem, which cushions it. And you already mentioned how nicely I'm able to say no. So I'm very nice when I say it, but I don't see arrogant or humble in that. And so coming back to humble, a couple thoughts there. Number one is gratitude. And so if we practice gratitude, so at a minimum, every night when my head hits the pillow, I just simply say thank you to kind of all that is. And just practicing gratitude, it's really hard to be arrogant when you're practicing gratitude. And so it brings that humility. Last point is going back to that spectrum. So the arrogant, humble scale, we're all somewhere on that scale. You can put everybody in your life somewhere on that scale. But here's what's really powerful. I urge you to start by putting a hash mark on the line from arrogant to humble where you think you are. And I'm talking to the audience out there. But then here's the aha walla moment. Now go to 5 people in your life who you love and trust the most and ask them to put the hash mark on the scale for you. And then you'll see where you really are. And the only point I'm making is I have learned and seen that a humble life is just a more peaceful life than an arrogant life. But you have to decide what you want to attract in your life. And at the end of the day, it's just one person, actually 2 people, with my co-author Rob's humble opinions.
That's great. And I think my main point actually there that you revealed even more is there's an arrogant way to say no and a humble way to say no. I mean, just by the fact that you realize that when someone asks you for something, it's because they need something. That doesn't mean that you just say no, go screw yourself. It means,
so good.
No, I can't necessarily do that for you, but I see you need help with this. Here's some other solutions. So really I think it's you can process it all through that. Well, Gino, always a blessing to have you around, man. Thank you for the work you put in the world. I'm a huge fan. I encourage everyone to check out the entire, hopefully it's 100 books soon, but all the books, buy all the books, check out all Gino's stuff. It's all profound. It's all simple. And I know you'll enjoy it. Check out his newest book, Shine. And thanks for joining us on the Question Able podcast, Gino. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Dan.